Loop Hero is one of those concepts for a game that I think really worked brilliantly as kind of a unique take on idle and roguelike design. And when it's firing on all cylinders, it's an amazing game, but I feel that, at least in the current version of it, there are some noticeable issues. So, the general concept is that we are trying to rebuild this world, or rebuild the Earth, one loop around at a time. The map itself is created via using these different cards, and you earn those cards by killing enemies and going around. By placing cards down, you change the properties of what enemies can show up, how they may behave, as well as your possibilities for getting more loot. And you can see the loot on the right hand side of the screen. Now, as you play through, you're building up a progress meter that you can see in the upper left hand corner of the screen. When that meter fills all the way, the boss shows up, and then you will have to get into a little bit of a fight. If you win, you move to the next chapter. Die, you'll take your resources and use them in the game's persistent element. Now, the challenge of Loop Hero is that all combat is entirely idle based. Like right now, I am not controlling my character here. Instead, all you do is based on the gear that you have. And when you die, of course, you're going to be sent back here to this area. This is the persistent element. You use the resources to unlock new features, systems, and even new classes and special cards that you can take into combat or obtain in the next chapter. This is a very big deal about the game because the game definitely spikes in terms of difficulty going from each new chapter. And getting these upgrades is a very big deal, including being able to get additional helpers, as well as these kinds of gold cards that provide a unique benefit provided you have them unlocked. Now, when you build your quote-unquote deck that determines what cards can show up, you have a minimum max, as you can see, as well as a min-max for each grouping. So you can't just load yourself with all the hardest cards or all the easiest cards and call it a day. And it's a very clever take on kind of the deck building strategizing that we see from the genre. How hard do you want to make the game, hoping that you can compensate and get rewards, but don't make it so hard that you're just going to get stomped out the second you start playing. And each one of the game's current 3 classes has unique benefits and rules to themselves. The rogue here, instead of getting loot drops, he gets trophy drops, which are then turned in for randomized loot whenever you complete a successful loop. While other characters, such as the Necromancer, can summon skeletons, which then get their stats propped or upgraded based on the gear that you're wearing. And there really hasn't been a game that has this kind of like passive yet still active kind of gameplay loop to it. No pun intended by that there. So with that said, I do have some concerns about this game that we'll get to in a minute. But I also want to give a quick shout out to the art and the aesthetics. It has a very gothic kind of look and feel to it. And I love this kind of style, especially some of like the full portraits that are used during cutscenes and descriptions of characters. In terms of the enemy designs themselves, one other thing to keep in mind that affects the difficulty and why when you're watching the footage here that I'm getting my butt kicked, is that as you go further in the game and do each higher chapter, enemies unlock new perks that are exclusive to that class. So, for instance, the vampire will gain additional lifesteal, zombies can get the ability, ghouls, to revive, as well as consume dead bodies, and a lot of this game definitely draws parallels to puzzle design. Because of how the various environmental cards can change properties, you're going to have to figure out the best ways to win. Because in a straight-up grudge match, you will most likely lose. Especially lose against the bosses when they show up. So, for instance, there is the card, the Blood Grove, that anyone who drops below, I think it's 25 or 35% of their total HP, is immediately killed while they're under that effect. But this card can also spawn a dangerous enemy who can also drop amazing loot if you can survive that. With that said, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to expand more on the loot system and why this is my least favorite part of Loop Hero's design. And now for a quick thank you to our current Patreon supporters. And if you're interested in my books on design, they are available at most major retailers. 20 Essential Games to Study is for first-time developers looking to be inspired, and the Game Design Deep Dive series covers the history and philosophy of major genres, with horror coming later in 2021. I fast-forward to a later play, so I can talk a little bit more about my issues with Loop Hero. Now, as I said in the last part, a key aspect of this game is the idle design, and how essentially your win or loss is going to be predetermined based on the gear that you get and what happens based on the tiles that you place down. And while that definitely, again, draws aspects of kind of puzzle and roguelike design, the loot system, I feel, is where this game gets let down the most. And it's going to be a little wordy to explain this. So, loot in this game is divided by class, the gear itself, the rarity, as well as level. The higher the level of gear, the higher its base stats should be, while the modifiers that show up are unique per class, and the rarer the gear is, the more modifiers it can have. So advanced play in Loop Hero is not only about getting really good drops, but getting really good drops that provide you with the synergies and passives that you need to survive. With my friend the Rogue here, you need evasion to really be able to stand a chance because you don't have defense or any other major forms of health recovery otherwise. Now, with that said, he does start with vampirism, but it's a base percent, and you can unlock more about this using one of the many subsystems that Loop Hero has. So the issue with the loot system is that, the first point, it's a little too wide in terms of its scaling. You're supposed to be getting gear based off of the comparative strength of the enemy, as well as their overall level. So if you look in the kind of upper right hand corner, the level of the enemy, or the level of the loop, is supposed to dictate the quality of the gear. You're supposed to be getting more powerful compared to the enemies that you're facing. The problem with this game is that that's not entirely true. The game dictates loot drops based on the level of gear you're wearing. So if I stick with amazing level 3 gear, most likely the game will only drop level 3 gear. Now, there is a chance it will scale higher, such as if I'm playing a level 10 loop, it may drop level 13 or 15 gear, but of course that is up to RNG. And the issue I have with this system is that it really reduces the amount of viable choices and strategy when it comes to playing this game. You need to play this game in an exact way, especially when you get to chapters 3 and 4, to really be able to stand a chance at winning. And it kind of reduces this game down to only the most min-max strategies that can work. Some people have found great ways of just stacking items that give evasion or vampirism. I use the strategy of building lots of forts and keeps, like the forts around my base, so that way I get free help, and set up so I can basically turn a boss fight into like a 4v1 fight against it. But the problem is that that's not really interesting to play. And when there's only one or two valid ways or routes to play, it becomes harder to really want to keep playing this game. And the game desperately needs a times 4 speed. I don't know if they've added that in since I last recorded this footage, but these runs can take a very long time. And it's surprising that they didn't put that in to begin with, especially for combat, considering that it is, well, completely hands-off. And I wanted to see more card interactions as well. There are a few combos in this game, but from the loot to the cards themselves, I wish that there was more that you could do here. So to begin to wrap things up, Again, as a concept and the basic design, Loop Hero is a fantastic game and a unique take on this kind of idle roguelike elements. And there's such a strong foundation to keep growing this game with more cards, more synergies, options, you name it. But at the moment, it may be a little too frustrating if you don't really like the concept of just repeating things again and again. And as I said, one of the best strategies I can give you is definitely to unlock as many of the options back in your hometown as early as possible, especially getting access to the arsenal and additional support through the keep system, or like the kind of like guard towers, I should say. With that said, I would like to thank the developers for giving me a press key to check this one out. If you'd like me to take your game in the future, please get in touch and come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, worries, and the art and science of games. Once again, this has been Loop Hero, and I will see you all next time.